Okay, good morning. Happy Monday, everyone. This is a very special episode this morning. We have our very first guest with us today. As we gave a little teaser a bit last week, we have a child therapist, Tracy Hofland, here today. She actually has so much good content to share. This will be part one of two-part episode. So this will be her kind of personal story and journey. And then next week, we're going to hear about more of the child therapy and parenting kids through divorce and trauma and grief from her. And she has amazing things to share for that. So welcome, Tracy.
Welcome.
Hi, good to be here.
We're so happy to have you on this beautiful sunny day.
Oh, it is gorgeous, isn't it?
It is. We're ready for the sunny side.
Yeah.
We really are. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Tracy?
Who is Tracy? Well, so my name is Tracy, and do I want to even know my age? Oh my goodness, I'm 55.
She's 25.
25, right? Yes. So I've been married for 36 years.
Wow.
Can't believe I'm saying that. And I'm married to my wonderful husband, Quinn, who's a firefighter. And we ended up getting married very young and having 3 great boys.
Wow.
And I grew up in the church. And I worked in the schools for 18 years as a child and youth counselor. And I always wanted to work with children and youth, counseling, working one-on-one. And then my job kind of drastically changed and we were more in the classroom. So, but I love what I do.
And you're so good at it. I have to say, I personally, when I found out you were going to do this for like on a full-time basis and not, I feel sorry for the schools that they've lost you, but I just think that you're like a gift to the Niagara region. I think you're so good at what you do. Tracy is my kid's personal counselor and she has been life-changing. I just can't say it enough. So I was so happy to hear that more families would have the opportunity to experience your gifting and the way that you're able to help kids and families. And I think it's literally like life-changing.
Oh, thank you, Pam. That's really overwhelming to hear.
It's all true, though. It is true.
It's just being able to give me the time to spend with families and children where I wasn't able to have in the school, and to really be able to use faith, because a lot of families that are coming to me, faith is definitely something that they are looking for with counseling, but not all. I work with both, and I'm very comfortable in both sides of that. And I also work with individual and adults now too. But
do you feel like, I know something we can share a little bit later on, but do you feel that part of your maybe ability to be so good at what you do is because of your own family? You guys have experienced some traumas, a little different from what we share a lot about, like divorce and the trauma of that, but your own family and your own children experienced a trauma of a different kind. And so do you feel like that gives you an understanding in a more real way of how to walk families and specifically kids through hurt and trauma?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think some types of things like grief, it can be very evident very quickly to the client if the person has not experienced it. It's one thing to have the knowledge. It's another thing to actually, not that you share a lot of your story, but that they really understand.
Like a
on
lived
that level,
experience.
a lived experience. And I really feel that I have something that might benefit them because of what I've gone through and what has helped and what didn't help. But it's also given me a passion for that as well too. I'm very passionate and very comfortable, where a lot of my colleagues, I remember even in the school system, but even today, counselors and therapists are often not comfortable in grief. I don't want to say all, because there's some really great.
Can you share
counselors.
a little bit about, like, specifically the trauma that your family walked through?
No, absolutely. So my husband and I, like I said, have 3 boys, not had, have 3 boys. And in 2007, we had gone away to a couples retreat. It was a marriage seminar that we were doing, and we were learning how to live out our faith better and just do things more together. And so we got back that afternoon, and my oldest son, Matthew, and his friend were just heading out with their dirt bikes that afternoon to do some riding, and he was really, really excited. And I gave him a hug and said goodbye, and I remember my husband said to his friend, "Take care of my boy." And so a little while later, we were actually at Fire Hall in St. Catharines, and my husband was, because he's also a firefighter, he was doing a shift change. So he was going in to actually get a signature for that shift change. And I was sitting in the car, and my youngest son, Daniel, at the time, went in with them. And I was actually in the car, and I was listening to a song that I was supposed to sing that following Sunday, Jesus Take the Wheel. And I was really struggling with that song, giving my kids to God. I was really struggling with
How old were your boys at this time?
Oh, really good question. So Matthew was 17, Michael was almost 14, and Daniel was 11 at the time.
Okay.
And so, Daniel, as I was singing the song, I'll never forget the scene. I saw Daniel and my husband and a group of firefighters just walking towards the car. And there was something very strange about, they were all looking as if they were looking through me. This is something I just won't forget. And I opened the door, and my husband Quinn said, "There's been an accident, and Matthew's VSA." And I said, what does that mean? And I would have known what that meant, but my brain was blocking me at that moment because I'm married to a firefighter. I've heard that term before, but I wanted clarity. And so basically...
And what does that mean, VSA?
Vital signs absent.
Okay.
So, there had been an accident, and he wasn't breathing. So there was firefighters on the scene.
So they had heard through the fire hall and told Quinn when he came in?
Quinn was in talking to a friend, and they received a call that it was actually Matthew at the scene.
Wow.
And so he was standing as close to his friend as you and I are, Leah, and that friend told him that the news that it was Matthew and vital signs were absent. And so he told me that, and we got in the car, and we started to pray, because that's what we do when, and so we were praying out loud together. My husband, and everything was in slow motion.
And you're driving to the scene or to the hospital, or where are you going?
We're driving to the hospital.
Okay.
We're driving to the hospital. And when we get there, they're working on Matthew, and very close friends of ours who were at the same retreat walked in, and my friend said to me, "Why would God do this? Why would God take Matthew?"
Right.
And I don't know how to describe this other than in that moment, I felt something move from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet, and I was saying stuff, but I didn't know what I was saying until I was
words
finished.
were coming out.
Words were coming out. And I said, if God's going to take Matthew, it's because it's going to change lives and people are going to accept Christ.
Wow.
And the wave left. It was like a wave, and the wave left.
We didn't even break.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, keep going.
And the wave left, but I had no understanding until I finished. And then we actually had to follow, my husband, I actually followed I was in the police car and he was in the ambulance. And we had to go further to Hamilton to do further testing.
Okay.
So at this point, is he like
On life
revived?
support?
Is he on life support? Like
He's considered brain dead, but they, as far as I understood at the time, they didn't have enough technology to say how much brain activity.
Okay.
Okay.
So we ended up going to Hamilton.
McMaster?
No, I think it was St. Joe's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so we were there for a while, and then they were trying to find my other son, and he was brought as well too. And so, yeah, at that moment, I remember that it's like I was being directed to pray, and it wasn't that long later that doctors came to us. A few came to us and said that that Matthew was gone, and there wasn't any brain activity.
Okay.
But that would we be open to for his organs, to donate his organs. And I remember thinking he had actually just filled out for his license that he was a donor. So I said, it's not even my decision. He's actually filled that out.
Yeah.
He's actually filled that out. So that was one decision I did not have to make.
And did you feel like, so when the doctor came in, do you feel like how much hope did you have? Did you sort of already feel that that would be the outcome? Or was that very shocking? And in that moment, when he said the news, how did that feel to you?
Yeah.
Like I was stuck, watching someone else, right?
Like,
and
this isn't
leading
my
up
life.
to it, I don't know if I had hope, but I didn't know. It's like I knew things were bad, but I didn't know the finality of
What'd that look like?
of that.
Yeah.
And so I just felt like we were all frozen. And but it wasn't until the next day that they turned everything off.
Okay.
So, and I remember afterwards feeling very guilty that I went home and I left my child there.
Right.
Thinking that a mother should be with their child.
Yeah.
And how did I know he was gone? When does his spirit leave the body? And all these questions
I'm sure.
came to me later. But I met the transplant person, and I honestly felt that I was handing my son to an angel. I don't know how to.
Wow.
The peace that I felt when we left and gave him, I can't explain it. I really felt that she wasn't even real as far as a person.
Just because of her demeanor, she was
just
so
her
compassionate.
demeanor, and she was so compassionate.
So good at her job.
Just the trust that I had, but then the guilt came later.
Right.
And the following day, we ended up going to Eton High School and talking to the student body.
The following day.
Yes,
because he had attended there.
He had attended there, and we were worried about his friends. We'd actually met with the two friends in the morning that he was dirt biking with.
Wow.
And then went to Eden, and we shared. Well, no, we were present. Craig Danielson was in charge of the spiritual life.
I don't even know how you mustered up the energy to even do that. That is clearly God's hand just in it.
I don't know how to describe that, because it's not where I was, and it's not like I was this incredible spiritual person. It's not that.
Right.
It's like in your complete weakness, where I felt like through this process where I couldn't move to the left, I couldn't move to the right, I could only trust God and jump, as if you're jumping off a cliff. And so none of it was my will, none of it was my decisions, and just that letting go. In that letting go was amazing, because I know and I felt God carry us. And I don't know how to explain these things other than what I experienced. I don't think, well, my husband would say the same. We have never experienced God move like he did after Matthew's death, and how we saw him move
Like his hand,
in not only this experience, but like miracles, like people I thought were angels. Like, I just literally felt that I was standing in liquid love. It felt like for 3 months, where it was like the worst and the best. No, let me rephrase that. Best is not. The worst, and I was on a mountaintop experience. I felt like at Jesus' feet, but the worst pain, but the joy was all around it.
Wow.
And it was only because my will was no part of it. So again, it's not who I was.
Right.
It's who God is, and what he was doing.
Yeah.
And when people say things like, "Oh, God helped me through this," or "God was there,"
He was
it's
really
like
there.
People sometimes don't know, well, what does that mean? What does that look like?
Yes.
But what you're saying is, it's like you wouldn't have known that before either, but you just experienced something emotionally, spiritually, that you can't even, I can see now, it's hard for you to even put it into words accurately,
it is.
right? Can I ask you, just to go back, there's two thoughts I had, just in a very practical way. So they tell you this about Matthew, they talk to you about organ donation, and then they send you home. And then what is that like? You leave the hospital without your child. You have these two other children. What does that night look like before you go to the school the next day?
Yeah, nobody's ever asked me that question. I remember walking through the door, and Michael, our middle son, big guy, he's always been a big guy, and him saying, "Are you gonna freak out now?"
No.
And asking if he could come into bed with us.
Yeah.
And he's never since asked that. But he was just scared of what was coming and scared of what was about to happen.
Yeah, because their family is, even if they don't, like, something's definitely now, there's been a tragedy, it's going to be different, but as kids, they don't know what's this even going to be like, right?
Daniel had been throwing up a lot at the hospital, and he was obviously under a lot. That's my youngest.
Because he was 11.
Yeah, and trying to cope with what's going on. And there were people with us. It wasn't just us. Like my mom and dad and pastors. There was like 3 pastors. So everybody was trying to support us.
Yeah, much as they could.
I remember that night I went down to his room, and we had just moved to that house not long before. And so the basement was mostly, like, it was his space.
Yeah.
And I just spent the night crying on his bed, just crying and just crying out to God. Yeah. But in the days to come, like, I was just overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed by the response. When you lose a child, it's like everybody you've ever met comes to support you, because and I remember that being, everything was like, I've never felt this before. Like at the funeral home, we felt like time stood still. My husband and I both would say that.
Like in a good or bad way? Like
great way.
Yeah, okay.
Where we felt like people would come through the line, and then all of a sudden, like, we felt like we could say things to people that we never could before. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense with what I'm talking about, but like, we really felt that we could actually share from a faith perspective and from things that we wanted to say to them. And it felt like time was standing still, that we had enough time, and that we knew what we're saying but none of that makes any sense with what
Right.
we're talking about.
Yeah,
and that's what
absolutely.
I'm saying. It was supernatural experience.
Yeah.
We
Where like God is giving you strength. Like even when
We were
people say
being-
that, like God gave me this strength, that is an example.
what-
of,
we were being filled.
yeah.
Because something like that happens. You can't will yourself to feel that way.
No.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
And when we had the funeral, I had to sit on my hands because I thought I was going to dance. And I kept referring to when we were getting ready to go in that Matthew's wedding. I kept saying that because as the preparations we were doing,
Like feeling like the preparing for the funeral was like preparing for his wedding, like a wedding. Yeah.
But the joy that I was experiencing, why I was sitting on my, it was both. It was like sadness, but extreme joy. And then we both got up and shared at the funeral, just thanking people for coming. And then, I don't know, I just started to go into what it was feeling like and how God was just, it was like we were covered in this warm blanket through this experience and we were being held.
Right.
And that, yeah, God was really real. And we really felt that people needed to know who Matthew was, but there also needed to be, shared why we feel that death is not the end.
Yeah.
And do you feel like that's where your joy came from? Is like knowing that he is with God and he has no pain and no suffering. And is that where your joy
Absolutely. I knew that my son is not gone. I know exactly where he is.
Yeah.
And everything that we want for our children, a lot of what we're thinking about is fluff compared to what we really want, what
Their
we
souls.
want. Yes.
Yeah.
And he's there waiting, and I know that he doesn't miss us because to him, it's like a moment and we're all there.
Yeah. What did they say? A day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day, right?
Yes. Yes.
So.
And I had 2 miscarriages way prior to that, so I even thought it's kind of
with his
cool in a
siblings.
sense that he's with 2 other siblings.
Yeah, he's not alone.
Left here and he's with 2 others. But there was just so many things that I just felt like, wow, God. It's like I would definitely say I doubted my faith before my son died in little ways. I have no doubts because I've seen God do things that are impossible. And I've seen, just the love that was showed through things that were done just blew me away.
Which is wild to think about. Like, I think back to, you in the car or whatever I think you're at the hospital where you say words are just coming out and you don't know what they are, but you're like, if God takes Matthew, like, there's a reason, right? And so I feel like God was almost preparing you in the craziest way for what was going to come, because I don't think that would be my, my first thought, but for whatever reason, God was preparing your heart. And then
it's almost like you're saying it to yourself even more than to that person.
Like,
yourself.
Yeah, like whatever.
Like, or God's saying that to you for that yourself or that person. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, there was a whole lot of that felt that way. Now looking back, at the moment I didn't know what that was, where I had an inner struggle with that song and giving my kids to God.
How ironic that you're
playing that song. But even like then fast forward to that night when you're in his room and just like crying on his bed, it's like, grief of any sort, but the grief of losing a child, like I can't, like I'm like, my son's gonna be 15 and I'm like, it's wrecking me even just hearing this story. But in that night you're just crying and praying, right? But it's not like you were down there mad at God, or like, it's wild to me that you just said that, you maybe doubted some faith things before he died, but after the death, your faith became stronger. And it could go one or two ways at this. Like, people would be so mad or hate God or whatever, but to me, what I'm taking from this story is just like, wow, like the faith that you learned through the grief. And like, like, what does that look like? Do you think that somebody could like work towards that? Is that something that's like, I think some people might be listening and being like, well, I don't have faith, or what does that look like? Like,
It says if you have faith as a mustard seed, right?
Yeah.
So it's very little faith.
yeah.
And all I had to do was put my trust. It was like it's like a battle of wills and giving up your will and putting God in the driver's seat, like being in the car and not telling him what to do, but actually having just him direct you. And so I think too many times in our life we tell God what to do, and in that moment, I really felt like, no, you're in the driver's seat, and I do not know what's next. I do not know what's to come. But it was, my husband and I both had a very similar experience, like, that we were completely being filled as we were empty. Like, and the things that happened just blew our mind about God. And it was, so many things were evident that it was God and not like man, or not like willing it, or people thought of it. It was many times it was the timing, and it was, it really was. He did not abandon us, but I know that not everybody has that experience, and I work with moms who've lost children, so I know that not everybody has that experience with grief.
Right.
And so I'm very fortunate, but I think it was about like my weakness and my giving up, right? Like I am weak, but he's strong. And that to me was what it really was about, in my greatest weakness, about giving up.
Yeah.
And just jumping off that cliff and just knowing that he's going to catch you, because there's no other plan. There's no other plan.
And it's amazing because I feel like in your faith journey, you can read things in the Bible or listen to teaching, and you can learn that way. And that's one part of it. But you had the opportunity to experience God like in a way that's so
Tangible.
real that you couldn't read in a book or learn, or that no one could explain to you, and that no one can take away from you, because people can debate theological things or
all the time. Yeah.
and that can be up for debate, but when you have an experience like that, like nobody can tell you that that's not real or that doesn't exist, even if you can't theologically explain yourself out of it, you experienced it, and
like
no
God
one
was
can take
close
that
to
away.
the brokenhearted for you. Like the
Yeah.
scripture came alive.
Literally,
Like
I think it's an opportunity, and it's about giving up our will, I think. Right? I think we all have the opportunity.
which
but
is human nature. The hardest thing to give up, I would say, is probably your will.
So you said that Matthew was with two friends when
Yes.
the accident occurred. Do you, obviously just share whatever you're comfortable with, but I would imagine, like, if as an adult you were present for a traumatic event, that would be hard. So he's
kid,
with two other teen boys. Something bad has happened. I'm assuming they're alone. Someone has to go for help. Like, what did that look like, and how did they do from that? Like, what happened that day? They're dirt biking, and they're by themselves, the three of them, or?
Yeah, so they're out at Broadway Gardens, and they had just started riding around, and these were new hills, and they weren't very big. The hill that it happened on is not even like any bigger than this table.
Wow.
And I remember looking at that the next day thinking, like, that's impossible. So
Did you go back to the scene?
We did. We did. And so, so Matthew had all the newest, best equipment possible. The only thing he was missing was this much here that was not supported or
Like
covered.
a neck guard kind of thing.
And neck guard. And they only really make those as if you're a trick.
Like a stunt kind of rider, right?
Yeah. So nothing that is really available for people who ride dirt bikes. So so we had all the equipment, and they had just started, and he was going over, and this was a newer bike to him, but this was the first time that he'd been out on his own with his friends, but he's 17. Like, this is not a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
And he definitely could handle the bike, and he had experience with dirt bikes. So he went over this hill, and the handlebars hit him right here, and it crushed his airway.
Wow.
And so one friend, just before this happened, was on his way back to his house, which was not far. to grab a cell phone at the time, and the other friend was with him. And Matthew undid his helmet and tried to get his chest protector off, and then
so he fell, hit his neck, and was still able to move. And
he actually he stood up and tried to get that off.
Wow.
And then he passed out, and then he never regained consciousness. So his friends were actually heroes, but it was not portrayed that the next day in the news. But his friends were heroes, where they performed CPR and they called 911.
Wow.
And then those
and
parents,
they're 17 as well, and they're doing that.
one was 15 and the other boy was 17.
That's
so
amazing.
They were
to have the wherewithal to do that.
Yes.
Wow.
And the parents that he had gone to the house to get the cell phone came and were praying over my son, waiting for the ambulance to come. And and some of the people that came, the firefighters actually knew of my son. So I know that was
just
hard on
surrounded
them.
with people that knew him, and even from like
because they made the connection with a phone call, right? That this was Quinn's son.
Quinn's son, yeah.
And then they had no idea that Quinn was like right there at the fire hall. And because I believe that team that was in the fire hall at the time had just come back and were called off. So they never actually got into the scene because there was enough people there.
Okay.
And so, so we were actually going to be going to the scene a little bit later with some pizza. We had ordered a pizza just before we went to the fire hall, and we were going to bring it to the scene before all this happened.
Wow.
But they were heroes, and the newspaper, I remember that picture the next day in the news, showed the backs of two boys' heads from the cop car, and it said that they were out there all day, and people were wondering, what was going on. It was so not. They were hardly there because I had just seen them.
Right.
I just saw my son. So I know it was only...
Like making them seem like they were up to mischief kind of thing. Oh,
wow.
And they were heroes.
Wow.
But they allowed us to actually share our story on the news several days later. But...
and how were they after?
How were the
fact,
boys?
Like, and even since, like, do you know, like, whatever you're comfortable sharing, like, if you can, or...
We went to see them. That was the first thing we did the following morning, and Victim Services had just left them because they were struggling, and so we wanted to go to them. And my husband really felt like he wanted to say to the boy that thank you. Not he didn't want him to think that it was his fault, and that he did, because when he said to him, "Take care of my boy," he wanted to replace that with thank you for what you did, and we wanted them to know that they're heroes and they did everything they could. And so they're a great part of the story. They didn't cause this. Nobody did anything that was foolish to cause it.
They were just boys dirt biking.
Just boys being boys, right? And I've never been able to actually find an accident where it's like this much, that where somebody would get hit and crush their airways. They said that even if ambulance were there, they would have actually had to have eyes on it to see what happened, to actually make sure there was an airway. Like there,
because you don't know what, even the boys, they probably just saw him go down. They don't know where he's injured, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's not like they would know right away, like, oh, his airway, right?
But they both, I did hear from them that he wasn't like in a panic. He was very peaceful, and I really believe that he wasn't in a panic, that it was a peaceful, like angels taking him home. Like he was...
And it was pretty quick, too.
It was pretty quick.
Right.
It was pretty quick.
Right.
Yeah, even though there was hours later till the finale, it
Yes,
really
for
happened
him,
on the
it would have been
field.
quick.
Yeah,
Right.
it really happened there.
Wow.
But it's a day that has forever changed our lives.
Yeah.
And God just continued to show up. And yeah, the things that he did to show us, you know, were unbelievable. We even had a mailman come a couple days after Matthew died. A mailman was delivering letters and saw my middle son Michael go out and get the letters, and he said, "Did someone in your house die?" Because there was a lot, and that's when we would send a lot of cards in 2007.
Yeah.
And he said, "Yeah, my brother." And he came in and told us. And the very next day, we got this 6 or 7 page letter from this mailman. Wow. And a check, because we had started a foundation, a check for that. And he shared with us that, he was actually the supply mailman, so he was not a regular mailman. Never saw him before, but he was the mailman for Chris and French's family when they had actually lost their daughter. Wow. And he was stunned by the fact that something simple as letters was bringing hope. And that's exactly what it did, because I loved that time of day where I would get the cards and the letters to sit and be encouraged by these people, and that's exactly what it did.
Wow.
And do you know that mailman, it was unbelievable. Years afterwards, it must have been like somebody's holiday time that they were always taking off. He would come.
Wow.
So he did that route for about 2 or 3 weeks, and just before, so that was when Matthew died. And in the letter he shared, the whole time he does his route, he'll be praying for us in that community. Wow. So the year later, he's back and he's doing that route, and we grab him and we actually go have lunch with him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Because he just touched us by
Yeah.
just a simple act as that.
Yeah.
And for years that was happening.
Yeah.
And this is crazy, but my dad was sick and my mom was working at a business not far from there, and lo and behold, this supply mail carrier shows up and my mom same
He's
guy.
like the angel mail carrier. Wow.
And he came in and my mom had this chat with him, and my mom called me and says, "You're never going to believe this, but this mail carrier just dropped off the mail," and she just felt encouraged. And
That's crazy.
and I remember, I think it was 4 or 5 years later, but I stopped in the one day and I said, I believe you're an angel and not real.
You're like, "Can I touch you?"
It's like, "I need proof, please."
Yeah. I said, "You don't realize the encouragement of what that means." And he said, "Well, I just like to encourage others." I tried to look him up to see if he existed. I couldn't find him.
So
Well,
maybe he's
that's
an angel.
interesting thing too. Like, what else, in a practical note, like if someone's going through grief like that, or loss or trauma or traumatic event, as friends, as family, as a community, what things did you guys, like, obviously, so I love that you mentioned that the cards brought you so much
They did,
peace.
actually.
Like, what other things did people do for you that brought you guys peace, or things maybe that you would have liked or wished that people did?
Yeah, well, thinking back, I really believe that if you lose a spouse or a child or somebody that's significantly part of your life, they shouldn't be driving to the funeral home by themselves. They shouldn't be driving to the funeral.
Yes.
Like, somebody should be doing that. People like that shouldn't be on the road. And that's not what we had, but that's what I think.
Wow.
Because I don't think people knew what to do, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying that. People did drive us to the funeral, but I think we drove ourselves to the funeral home. But also, like, really, it was really important. Meals were a lifesaver, because it's not
even function,
in your brain capacity. And I didn't actually go into a grocery store for a year.
Wow.
Because I didn't feel comfortable with the first time interactions to explain. It wasn't the people that already knew, it was the ones that I would have to explain.
Right.
So that, I didn't get meals for a year, but a long time. It was so amazing. Anything practical, anything practical, mowing somebody's lawn, cleaning their house, meals are so amazing. But people think that it's something like magic that you say or do that is, you're not going to change what happened.
Yeah.
But you showing up for them and giving them a hug.
Yeah.
It's okay to say I don't know
Even
what
if
to
you're
say.
uncomfortable. Yes. I was going to say, even if you don't know what to say, if you're uncomfortable, because I'm sure like the people that, you know, those, even if they saw you in the grocery store,
Yes.
and not knowing what to say, but it's like, just because you're scared to say something, you know, doesn't mean like it's so important for you to just be like, I just want to give you a hug and let you know I'm praying for you. I'm sure that would have meant the world to you.
Yes. Because I had people actually, I'd walk towards and they'd walk away, even on my own street at the time. And at the time, I was really hurt by it. But later on, I realized that it was their own uncomfortableness of what I was dealing with.
Yeah.
And they were afraid that they were going to make it worse.
Right.
But you can't make it worse. You really just showing up, giving somebody a hug, just holding space for them. And it's not like about the first few days or week. Like if somebody brings you by a meal and it's a month or two or 6 months or a year late, like
it means so
that
much.
means so much too, that people haven't forgotten about you.
Yeah.
They've moved on.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, I have a cousin that lost her little girl. And one thing that she always says is, you know, people like kind of like bounce around the idea because they don't want to like upset me by bringing up her name. But she was like, I want you to bring up her name. She's a part of me for the rest of my life. And I want you to be like talking about her and talk about the good memories and all those things. Is that something that you would resonate with, or?
Absolutely, 100%. I don't think I've met any moms that don't want to hear that name.
Yeah.
They existed, they mattered,
Yeah.
and they are forever part of our story.
Yeah.
And so, absolutely, we want to hear that you remember. And even when people used to, and they still do today, where they'll mess up my kids' names and say Matthew, and they'll be, I'm so sorry. I'm like,
That's okay.
it's so good.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. And God is good. And like, I'm about to have my first grandchild. Wow. And we have never had anything in April to be excited about.
Is that when it happened?
Because it happened in April. We've never had birthdays. We've never had anniversaries in our family. Nothing. So it's so amazing that God's like redeeming April. And
is baby due in April?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
even that, you're
like-
just like, sure, you could say that's a coincidence, but really, you're just like,
God's in it.
You can just say God is just
so good.
providing a
Providing.
joy of 12 months of the
And
year.
He's in the details. God is in the tiniest of details.
The tiniest of details.
That we might overlook, or coincidence or serendipity, whatever, you know. But it's like, no, He's in the details. So how long has it been?
So it's 2007.
Okay.
So
That's my
it's
math.
hard
I'm
to
terrible.
think. It's hard to think that he would have just had his 35th birthday, but then he's forever 17. So it's hard for my brain.
Your brain, yeah.
And it was hard for my brain when my kids passed that age to think that they are older than him.
when he was the oldest.
When he was the
Yes,
oldest.
yeah.
Right.
That was hard for my brain to get around, but and it is still like grief is not something that you just get through and you're done. Grief, it's like you're learning how to do life again with the grief.
Yeah.
You know, learning how to do that. So, but God has been really good to us, and I would never trade being Matthew's mom, even if I knew that I would just have him for 17 years. Like, I would never trade that for not going through the pain, because it's totally amazing. He was my first everything. Yeah.
He's the one that made you a mom.
he is the one that made me a mom forever. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I had, again, like just hearing it, I can't imagine that pain of losing a child. They say it's some of the worst pain.
They do say it's the worst
in the world. You know, bearing a spouse or those things, or parent are obviously hard, but like losing a child. But yet I sit here, wow. wow, with tears in my eyes, but seeing you like with such like joy in your heart and like peace, like you just, as you speak, you just bring a peace into this room, you know, and it's our first conversation and I just can't help but feel, like a peace that just like illuminates off of you. And even you saying like you wouldn't trade it, I'm like, I don't know a lot of parents that would lose their child and say that and say I wouldn't trade it, but you know that like God was for you and is in it. And so to sit and be like, no, but so much good has come of it. Like, I'm just like, it has to be God, and God is using your story and will continue to use your story to like bring encouragement to like other, especially grieving parents.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's only God. And I know that there's, you know, viewers that don't have faith, but I work with those that also don't have faith, but I don't know how to do this any other way. And I literally saw things that are impossible.
Yeah.
That I knew he was guiding me. He didn't, I wrestle with the idea like to, you know, God do this, God, you know, God kill Matthew.
Right.
No, that's not what happened. You know, we live in a sinful world and accidents do happen.
Yeah.
But this did not destroy us.
Yeah. Which even your marriage, like statistic wise, I mean, you might be able to speak better into this, but
it's very, very high.
After a death.
80s, I'm not sure if it's 82% or higher, but it's extremely high that most marriages
after
end
death
in
of a
divorce.
child.
So that, talk about the details, that marriage conference that we were at the weekend, like Matthew died on the Sunday, we came home that day, met him in the driveway, was really about doing our faith together.
Wow.
And the timing of it is not something I could have planned. And we actually, so our anniversary was May 6th and Matthew died April 22nd. And at that conference, we wrote each other letters. Like my husband and I love letters to each other. And we actually walked away with this certificate about our vows, like a different vow to our kids about how we would stay together, our family unit, like a vow to them. So that May 6th, decided a short time before this that we were going to call our friends together, and in our backyard we were going to have this little ceremony where we were going to read those letters to each other, and we were going to sign that certificate with our other two kids. And that's how we celebrated our first anniversary, because our kids, we were hearing the people were saying, even to them, that a lot of families get torn apart, and even they were hearing that then.
Wow.
And so we felt that it was the line in the sand for them to know that
we're in this.
We are together. We are a family unit. That this will not break us. That God will carry us through this.
And it's beautiful to see, even obviously with our podcast being, you know, our stories about divorce and stuff. Because you said you've been married how long again?
36 years.
36 years. So even you saying that at the very beginning, you know, I wanted to like make a joke like, marriages make it that long? Like, you know, but it is so true. The fact that like, you know, not every marriage is a bad one. Not every relationship, every decision you make is a bad one. Because, I mean, look at you guys. You've been married this long, been through literally hell and back.
Yep.
Yet I can hear through your entire story, like the sunny side. Like I really can. Like this was a episode that I think Pam and I were like, oof, like how are we ever going to bring it back to the sunny side?
Yeah.
And even to like be respectful enough to you and your family to be like, how are we going to talk about the sunny side? But I'm like, I feel like that's all you did this whole episode.
It strengthened our marriage.
Wow.
It should have dissolved it, I guess, in that sense. But because we had to learn how to do things together. And it's like we weren't on the same page every day, but we were on the same page. We didn't grieve apart. We were grieving together.
And do you feel like the work you do now, that's kind of like led you into it, like to even dive deeper just with your own grief and wanting to help kids and
there's
adults?
No way that I would have been doing the type of work that I do in grief had I not had the experience, because it's scary to walk because I remember walking into our first counseling appointment with my husband, and I walked out and I said, that man's never experienced grief. And I said, he may know. He told us we were good and that we had lots of coverage and to come back whenever we needed it. And we had only lost our child a week. So I knew that, I knew that was important and that people needed to know that I really understood.
Yeah, you can relate.
Well, because grief can be like from a loss, a death, but also when children experience divorce, there's grief. If they have a terminally ill or chronically ill parent, there's grief in that. If they have a big move cross country from their friends, there's grief. Like grief is such a common theme. So your grief doesn't just help kids in loss of a loved one through death, but I feel like that is part of what makes you such an effective and compassionate counselor for children, because grief is unfortunately like universal in so many traumas and tragedies. And you're right. Like, I think kids are so smart too. Like they understand that you understand.
Yeah.
They get it, right? They know, okay, you actually understand. It's not just you're repeating things that you learned in school or whatever, but you're speaking from lived experience, and that provides a completely different experience as far as like walking someone through healing and stuff. But this was such an amazing episode in so many ways. I feel almost like I need a nap. I'm just like so emotional. Just because I was trying to hold it together. I didn't do that kind of a job. But I was just thinking to really end it on like a sunny note and just to really take a minute to just remember Matthew. Like, would you share like 3 things that you loved about Matthew, or 3 great things that we can like remember about Matthew?
Okay. So Matthew was very passionate about life, enjoyed multiple sports like basketball, dirt biking. He did off-road biking as well.
Very active.
Very active and loved, had a real drive for that type of thing. He loved people, loved his family, and loved God. And I will never forget, he was my one kid that would come in from his day and lie beside me and tell me about his day. And it was so precious.
Yeah.
But he was such an amazing kid. He was, if you didn't know him, you'd think he was quiet. But if you knew him, you knew he'd have a big personality.
Yeah.
You know, and his friends would tell you that. And he was always just so much fun.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, thank you, Tracy.
I know.
You are so welcome. Oh, my pleasure.
Being so encouraging. I feel like every time with you, I know I'm like, as my kids would say, I'm like a Tracy Glazer. That's like,
that's a word.
That's
Tracy Glazer.
It's like, but I just love any minute I can spend with you. It's just so refreshing, and you really do like bring the sunny side through everything. You're just, amazing, and
Yes.
we're so grateful that you spent time with us, and
I'm so grateful for the opportunity.
and we're excited to have you back next week too.
It's true.
But thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. We so appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Thank you.
Love what you guys are doing.
Yeah. On that night? On that note?
So I don't know. I like where all that was going.
Amazing. Holy.